pay and benefits. And I'll show you our agenda in a moment. So this is going to be a general overview, perhaps a refresher for some of you, and for if any of you have not filled out a survey before, I think it'll be quite valuable because it's always a challenge to figure out where to start and where to go next. So, all right. So today's topics, we're going to talk about the role and element of compensation. I just have a few brief slides to orient you to the concept of compensation and really where it is in your toolkit for attracting, retaining, and engaging your employees. We're compensation consultants, and I'll tell you that we recognize that compensation is only one piece of the puzzle. We all know we need to get it right, but there's other levers that are actually often more powerful to do those things. So today we'll be talking about, after that, how to evaluate surveys to determine if they're appropriate to your needs. There's lots of surveys out there at different price points. And so how do you know what are the ones to use on a regular basis? How do you know which ones you want to participate in? Because often there's a discount offered if you're a participant, and some of them are even free if you participate. So that being said, if you found a survey you like, how do you efficiently participate? It's very time consuming. I know of a local company that actually has 10 people, they're very large, and they have 10 people in their compensation department, and much of their time is spent participating in surveys and then using that data to benchmark. So once you participate, then you get the data. The next question is, how do you take the survey report and benchmark your own internal pay to that market data? So it's not just about the market point. That's a point in time, and we'll talk about that. And then lastly, if you're looking for surveys, how do you, where would you look? And I have some sample ones that I can show you some different price points and different options for national data sets as well as local. And I'll also be talking about the where you should use which one. So what I'm going to do for a second here is if anybody has any, I'm going to go over here to the chat box. If anybody has any questions that they would like me to answer specifically today, and you could just put that in the chat box. If there's something specific you have that you want to make sure I address. Okay, I'm not seeing any input. Okay, so I guess we'll go through it. We'll go through it, and I will let you know as we go if there's anything that is relevant to what your needs are. So that's what we advertise that we'll be covering today, and I'll get started on that right now. Okay, so I mentioned about compensation and where does it fit in your overall toolkit in human resources. So when we talk about compensation systems, typically you have 4 goals. You want to have them internally consistent, your employees to feel that they're fair or equitable. And that's where compensation can go awry if they don't have that sense of perception of fairness. You want them to be externally competitive compared to market. 90% of organizations in the World at Work survey last year, it used to be called the American Compensation Association, so they're the compensation and rewards industry group. 95% say they want to match the market. That's every organization's goal. So we want to know what the market is then. We also want to make sure that we're recognizing desired employee contribution and behaviors. Some of that's with base pay in terms of recognizing a change in job level or change in maybe perhaps a step of a job or a promotion. And it's also really powerful to recognize employee behaviors when you do incentive plans if they're properly designed. So any kind of variable pay that rewards and motivates a specific behavior that helps your organization succeed. And lastly, from an HR internal perspective, we want it to be efficient to administer. I had a client many years ago who started with 100 salary grades. So, they were sort of arbitrarily different by a quarter or 50 cents. And you can just imagine the administrative burden of doing that. So we actually simplified it down to 10, which is pretty consistent with mid-sized organizations. So that's our typical goals, and I can surmise that you're interested in similar goals as well. And then, so my partner, Jerry Newman, just retired from the University of Buffalo School of Management, and he's still updating his, every 2 years he writes a textbook with a retired professor at Cornell called George Milkovich, and it's called Compensation. So they've had this model for about 35 years, and Jerry calls it very artfully, the 3 triangles. So the 3 triangles are, you look at the 3 things that employees, how do you make sure you can impact behavior? Motivational factors are one side of behavior, ability, and then the environment, so the context that you put employees in. You can see the compensation is only one of 9 points on the 3 triangles. In fact, culture and performance management on the top here can be much more powerful motivators. Some incentive plans done well can be extremely motivational if done right, but especially with base pay, we'll talk about how base pay works into the mix in a few minutes. And then ability also plays a role. Did you place the person in the right position? Do you select the right person to begin with? Are they trained? So those are things that can, compensation isn't going to fix that. And then environmental type things in terms of planning, organizational development, design, their supervisory and management experiences. So that can play as much of a role. So it's important. You've got to get it right, but it also needs to work in conjunction with all your other pieces. And when we talk about compensation, it's important to recognize that there's really three pieces of compensation. There's base pay, and that's mostly what we'll be talking about today, benchmarking your base pay to salary surveys. Change in base pay and the ways in organizations do that, and they send different messages, so that's part of that desired employee behaviors. And then change in base pay you can benchmark to Aon Hewitt and a couple of other organizations run an annual national survey every year that says how much are employers increasing base pay. Is it 3% as it was from 1999 to 2008, and now it's been 2 and 2.5%. So you also want to make sure you're looking at what the peers in your industry are doing. But that's the way to benchmark it. And then the other lever is, well, how are we increasing base pay? What are we rewarding? What behaviors do we want? Across the board increases so everybody gets the same? Do we have a time or a seniority based where after a year you automatically get an increase? According to that survey I referenced a few minutes ago by World at Work, 84% of organizations are doing merit increases. So that's where pay, as you all know, pay is linked to someone's performance, and top performers get a slightly larger change in base pay than an average or a poor performer. And also skill increases, they are relevant for some jobs, and so they're different than a step or a time-based because you actually have to prove a proficiency level or move into another job. They were in real favor in the 1990s and the early 2000s, and in certain environments they can be really powerful. But that's really your universe of possibilities for change in base pay. And then lastly, variable pay. So variable pay you can also, and I don't talk about it here very much, but you can also benchmark what the targets are for different levels of jobs. So management has a different target of variable pay, your incentives, your bonuses. Management has a higher level than a staff, than a production worker. So it can be helpful to target those so that you are paying something competitive with other organizations at different levels. And variable pay can be, we can talk for 2 hours on it, any possible way of designing short-term incentive plans that don't add to your paycheck. So that's the elements, and we'll spend most of the time on base pay. And then in terms of compensation decisions, so when we talk about strategic compensation and compensation strategy, really there's one major choice, and that's, are you going to lead the market, match the market, or lag? And I mentioned the survey of thousands of organizations at 90, maybe it was 95, a high 90% number says they want to meet the market. No one really has a desire to lag. Interestingly, of those 90-something%, I think only about 80-something% were actually at the market. So there was a gap for some of them where they wanted to be at market, but they weren't there yet. And then lagging is a really challenging situation, as you all know. Trying to attract people when your pay is below what other peers offer is very challenging. So most people don't typically, on purpose, decide that it's a strategic choice. And then in terms of goals, as I mentioned, all of this is really about attracting great people, retaining great people, and motivating your people, and rewarding them for the work that they do. So when you have a strategy, that really comes down to a structure. And I think it was in 80% of organizations have some sort of base pay structure, so that's the grades. And organizations use a combination of market pay and then usually some sort of point or factor system to assign jobs to ranges. And then, as you probably all know, there's a midpoint and a max, a midpoint and a max for salary structures. I have a whole presentation on how those work that I may offer as a webinar later this year. But so that's basically, the structure is really helpful in terms of a method to evaluate yourself to the market, because you want your midpoint to be at the market, and that's how you know you're market competitive. And then you may have a market competitive structure, but you also have to make sure that people's movement through the structure, so the change in base pay based on promotions, change in base pay over time, that people are moving up, to also have maintained market competitiveness. And then lastly, what we usually find is that structures that have been built before we help a client are okay, or that maybe they need a little refreshing, but where the real gap is in internal equity. So how one peer is paid compared to another. And so you've got your strategy choice to compare to the market. You have your design decisions that make a big impact on compensation under your base pay structure. And then lastly, you have your total package decision. So how much are we going to match the market on base pay? Are we going to match or exceed it on variable pay? Are we going to have a richer or poorer benefit package? Looking at the total compensation that an employee gets in any kind of pay, and then change in pay, variable pay, as well as their benefit package. So you want to make sure, and I'll talk about benchmarking your benefits in a moment at the end of this presentation. So those are the pieces that you need to make sure you have all working in sync, and you want to make sure there's a portfolio that helps you reach those goals of attracting, retaining, motivating, rewarding. So that's the big picture. So for base pay systems, I know most mid-sized organizations that I work with in Western New York have salary ranges or grades. And many of them have been kind of legacy grades that the job has been assigned based on some factor that may or may not be clear and transparent at this point. And the three ways to do it are, if I start at the bottom, market-based salary grades. So you price a job and you say, oh, these jobs are around $50,000 a year. We'll put them in the around $50,000 a year midpoint range. The challenge with that is if you don't have market pay. And it's almost impossible to get market pay on every job. You can also do a very general one at the top, comparable worth. Well, these basically have master's degrees and they're entry level. These are non-exempt, semi-skilled positions that you need some experience, but you don't need a degree. So you group those in one grade. You group your entry-level bachelor jobs in another grade, a higher grade, and then your experienced bachelor jobs in another. So that's a pretty good way of doing it. It's a little less clear and transparent to your staff and your managers. And so the middle way, job evaluation, is the way the U.S. government, you know, they all talk about on the GS-18. It's the way that the granddaddy of this process, uses it for the Fortune 1000, and mid-sized organizations can also use job factors. So you rate jobs on things that are known to impact pay, compensable factors, such as job knowledge, decision-making, accountability, some other factors, communication. And that's what the Hayes actually calls layer 3, and then there's some sub-factors. So if you rate the jobs on those factors and come up with a rubric, a metric to then add those up and put jobs in a grade, there's a little bit more ability to handle jobs that don't have market pay, as well as jobs that maybe don't really fit in the category of entry-level bachelor. Well, what about a super skilled associate degree person? Where do they go? So job evaluation is really sort of the best of both worlds. And we have another presentation on that as well. Okay, so we're talking about how to put jobs in grades. Now we're going to talk about, all right, well, why do you want to go for market data at all? Jobs and grades are terrific. We have comparable jobs and comparable work, but we need to price those grades, and that's where market data comes into play. So market data brings the external job evaluation or other job slotting, grading. It gives you the internal picture. So market data will assist you in obviously determining your position in the local and the industry market. It'll help you to attract and retain employees because you have competitive pay and benefits, and not this, reports from the field that we just can't hire anybody at X rate. You have actual data to help you with that, and you're being more proactive. You can be monitoring the market to make sure that you're at or above, ahead of it, instead of playing catch up and being reactive all the time with your hiring rates. Obviously, it's going to help you make informed decisions about pay practices and change in base pay. Pay is one of these things that everybody recognizes is pretty emotional, and it's hard for us, with the absence of data, to not be informed and strategic about it. And then it just helps you be proactive and monitor internal and external pay equity issues. So again, you're getting ahead of these instead of finding that people leave because there's equity issues you didn't know existed and you didn't address. So if we know we want market data, then we have to go find the right survey. And I think every senior leadership group I ever get in front of wants to say, well, who should we benchmark to? And that's really one of our starting questions, right? If we say we want to be the market, well, what's the market? So the market's usually defined as employers hiring the same kind of worker, and typically the geography of your typical your recruiting area. So if you're in, middle of Erie County, Western New York, you're going to be, and most people don't want to drive more than 20-ish miles, at least in our town, commuting, then we really are looking at other employers they're hiring similar workers. If we're hiring people at slightly above minimum wage with low skill, then they could be coming from McDonald's, they could be coming from light production, they could be coming from retail. So I mean, the industry may not matter as much as the type of worker. If we're looking for, I had a client that's looking for a rheologist with a PhD. Well, I think there's about 80 in the whole country. So in that case, with local data is not going to be so helpful, but there may be some one-off positions like that. Typically, especially up to staff and first-line department managers, you're going to be recruiting on a local basis, and you should benchmark locally. For very high senior level positions, you may be doing, for instance, CFO, Chief Financial Officer, you may be doing a national search, in which case you'd want to be benchmarking your senior leadership. But I work with a local company that's grown, and they're global, and they're hundreds of millions of dollars. So we did definitely look at the industry, but we also looked at, and they do, they just brought in a new CFO from across the world. But we want to make sure that at least for up to department managers and sometimes even directors, we're looking at the region that we're recruiting from. Okay? And then ideally you want to find multiple survey sources. There's always some variability in the data and the data set. The participants may not be exactly right for you, so you want to have a snapshot of a couple different ways. So I usually recommend a kind of a triangulation, 3 different things. You want to look at local data from actual employers if you can get it. Some surveys and some national surveys interpolate the local data. So they take national data they have from real employers and then they just apply a geographic adjuster, which is not the same thing. There are pockets of supply and demand. Teachers, we have too many of them in this town, and in the South, they can't find enough of them. So we got master's teachers working as daycare assistants at $13 an hour because of the supply and demand pocket here. Same thing with nurses. We have quite a few that don't have them in the South. So that drives pay very significantly. So you want to look at local data. You want to look at industry-specific data. It's often hard in industry data to get it clean enough for your region as well, because there's a lot of high-pay markets that are included, like Boston or Chicago or LA or New York City. So industry data is often very helpful for looking at specific job titles and looking at the difference between, say, this level job and the next level job and the manager and then the director. So looking at so you would maybe use local pay for setting your pay, but then making sure that a supervisor is 10% more than the people they supervise, for example. And that's where industry data can be really helpful. And if you can find national data for a similar organization size and a similar industry, I have a client that takes part in a New York City boutique consulting firm called McLaughlin, and they do huge salary surveys for some really big organizations and really expensive to participate. But what you could get with that is a custom cut. You could get, and then they pick 12 peer organizations with similar sizes, obviously in the same industry, because that's what it was, an industry survey. And they were actually to pick in average pay markets, so not the high pay markets. And we use that as a benchmark as well. So industry, local, and then sometimes we use a sort of a vanilla national database like Economic Research Institute that really fills in the gap. So it provides a little bit of the local interpolation, not actual data, and then the national. So we're looking in. And if they sync up, then you know that each data source is relatively helpful. And then the other question is, so we have surveys, we figured out what our market is. I'll talk a little bit later about where to go hunting for those surveys. But when you do a survey, you're not going to find market data on 100%. So the real gold standard is that you can find market data for 75% of your employees would have a match to a market level, and that half of your job titles. You may have a lot of single incumbent job titles and some ones that differentiate from the market a bit. Or there's just, you have the title, but that's not really the market title. Not a close enough match. So that is actually a great market analysis. It's reliable. The other thing about having multiple survey sources is that reliability from year to year. That's not jumping around your data sets. Okay, so that's how to find the right survey. And then when you're looking at multiple options, you want to look at, of course, one of your factors is the cost. So the one I mentioned, I think it was $25,000 a year, which came with a whole bunch of other consulting, but that's a lot for a survey set. You want to make sure that the participants' characteristics match yours. We were looking for a client for oil and gas, and they're a very boutique firm. When we called up Mercer had lots of great data, which is one of the global consulting firms in compensation. Mercer had great data, but when we looked at it, the size of the organization was so large compared to what we'd be using. It just wasn't a match at all. So you want to find out what job titles are in there. You want to find out if their industry and geography represent your recruiting area. This particular company was in a different area, not necessarily down in Texas where a lot of the oil is, or Alaska. So again, it wasn't relevant at all to the kinds of pay they needed for their people. In the end, we found a boutique consulting firm that specialized in smaller oil and gas drillers, and it was a perfect match. So you also want to find out more about the methodology and the transparency. Do they give you an actual participant list? Did they tell you when the data came from? How often did they survey? If you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics and ERI, the Economic Research Institute, they both use a combination of real data, and there's a whole statistical interpolation thing that happens. So well, I'm not saying it's not reliable, but it's different. So you want to know where your survey data is coming from. And then you want to find out, what's included. What data set do I get? What statistics? Do I only get a median? Do I get a report of a number of incumbents and the companies that reported it? Those are kinds of things you're going to need in a minute, as I'll talk about. Can you get a custom cut? So can you take this set and get your own list and pick either by demographics, by size, or by industry, whatever. Get your own more targeted data set. And that's something we're actually offering this year in our survey. We did the programming so we can take what companies we want and slice out a different subset. And then for benefits, it's helpful. Benefits, often you're going to be looking at a local benchmark, but sometimes it's helpful to see what the plans are, what employers contribute, who's eligible. Especially variable pay can be really helpful if you can get industry data on it. So those are the things you want to also see. What else is included? It's helpful. And then lastly, you want to consider how hard it is to participate, because you only have so much time, and you probably want to find the relevant data, but you also want to make it fairly easy to participate. So find out how do I submit my data, and how often do I have to provide it? Is there any way it makes it easier for me to produce it from year to year, anything like that? Okay, so that's sort of the factors to say, should I do this survey versus that one? All right, so for national surveys, the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics has surveyed major employers. The lady who's in charge of our area from New York City was in town a few months ago, and she said they do a statistical analysis to decide who to poll. They do have Buffalo data. They have Southern Tier data. They call it Southwest New York. They have Rochester, Syracuse. They're all separate, and it's free. It's online. They're still working off 2014, but 2015 will probably be launched soon. Wage Access is has some smaller employers and some larger, and they have some Buffalo data, and that's $349. Salary.com and PayScale, both of them are employee self-reported. There may be some Buffalo or regional data in there. They may not, probably not a lot of depth. You can get a single report for free from both of them, and it's a completely different methodology. So you're asking employees what they're paid versus surveying an employer and finding out what all of the employees are paid to get a sense of that middle point. So there can be some skew. If you need some really obscure job title, that might be a place to go. Comp Data has 4,000 companies, so this is a relatively inexpensive survey that a lot of organizations use. It says they have data on 6 million employees. I couldn't find that they had much from our region. So when they've got 6 million employees with 4,000 companies, they're obviously surveying large companies. And I believe it's last time I looked, it was around $900 for the Northeast slice. Some of these surveys are sliced by region, by industry, or you could buy a certain set, or often, in the case of Towers Watson and Mercer, they do it by kind of job. So administrative versus staff versus manager are different data sets you have to purchase. So Towers Watson, Mercer, and Hewitt also has those. They're surveying the largest companies, 1 million, 1.6 million employees. They probably can give you a custom cut for a price, and you're looking at $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 to get the whole data set. And then industry groups depends on the group. My mom's in a small industry group with 60 companies that are $1 to $10 million companies, and they do a great survey of the key jobs in her industry. So it just depends. So you have to hunt around for those. And then for the next page here, I'm first slide. Okay. All right. And then for the local data, U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, as I said, has major employers in each region: Buffalo, Niagara, Rochester, Southern Tier, whatever. You name a region, they have it, and on a different page. Wage Access, which is also in conjunction with the Buffalo Niagara HR Association. The SHRM group locally has their survey for $3.49, and you could participate every quarter and have a rotating calendar. And then our survey, we survey organizations mostly 250 to 500 employees, or 500. We have some on the 5,000 side. Last time we had 67 organizations, and it's $4.49 to participate. And then if you're interested in Rochester Business Alliance, which is their chamber, has 192 companies. Actual data from Rochester for $4.90. So that can be a nice data set, especially if you're closer to that area or you just want to see how they sync up. The 192, there's going to be a bunch of those that are small, but I'm sure they have a way to slice the data that you could compare. And even in our survey, we do small versus large data statistics, so you can benchmark based on the size. So where to get industry data? There's where Google search comes in a great help. Industry organization, looking at the boards or associations to see if they have a survey. There's some major national survey providers that do take, like oil and gas, they've taken on certain industry sets that they're interested in, banking, insurance. There's often some boutique industry consulting firms. We found that one in oil and gas. And the SHRM actually has a salary survey directory. You can search on their website to see if there's other local regional industry data sources there, and of course an internet search. But the SHRM has hundreds listed there. You have to slog through them a bit, but there may be something that seems like a match for you there. Okay, so let me stop this for a second. Go back to chat here. If anybody has any questions right now, just enter it in the chat line. No? Everybody's following along okay? Okay. Well, all right, either I'm covering everything or you're all in overwhelm. So I'll start up again and then say, okay, now how do we participate? Well, even if before you participate, you can often ask for the blank. What are the instructions? Give me the blank so I can see what jobs are included. I can see what data you're asking. Do we even have that data, right? So the blank is always helpful, and that helps you get organized. When we started our survey in 1999, we literally had packets printed up and just mailed them to every prospect, in our mid-sized industry group in town. And then you had the blank, and you knew. Right now we have those on the website, so you can get the blank for the job titles as well as the blank for the benefits. So you can get prepared. So, and you can always parse it out. You can say, well, our benefits person knows these benefits questions, have them fill it out. Once you have your data, it's fairly fast to enter it. I know our portal takes, and I've done them because we either do it for a client or something gets lost or whatever, lost in our data set. But lost in the mail, whatever, we've had to have somebody fax it last minute. So it takes like 10, 15 minutes once you're all organized. So once you get your packet, you know what you need to ask or fill out, you're going to match your jobs to the survey titles. The survey should have a little description, a little 1 or 2 sentence blurb that says a program manager is IT help desk specialist, helps with software, hardware, on call, may go out in the field and fix a printer, whatever. So you read that and you want to report your job if it seems like it's about a 75% match. If it seems like it's a little too high or a little too low, then you really should report it. And it's important when you get into the manager titles you don't overstate. So we have a way we try to differentiate the director level, but that's only if there's managers and then a director. Otherwise, it's a first-line manager that we've given a title, because we want to make sure we don't have sort of title escalation in our survey. And we do a lot of cleaning of the data to make sure that if somebody's paying twice as much as somebody else, that's a little suspect that maybe it's not a good job match. And you may even find we reach out via email and say, tell us about that job, or is it really this? We want to make sure you don't have outliers that are skewing the data. So you want to have a 75% or so match in scope and responsibilities. And then you have to do computing your statistics. I'll show you in a minute how we fast track that. One of the ways is to take your employee database, put it in payroll, bring it out to Excel. Hopefully you can do it in your HRIS system, but not that many have it, where you can label it with the survey title. So we call it our HR specialist, but that's an HR generalist in most surveys. When you do that, then you can compile, we have lots of assemblers, but we'll call them all just assembler so that when we compute it, we have, 50 of them and we have the rate right there. You also want to make sure you convert pay to the same unit. Is the survey asking you for hourly, for annual, by full-time equivalent? If you have a bunch of part-timers, do you prorate it? Because if you put the wrong data in, then obviously it can't be compiled into the whole set of data. If some surveys ask for your salary grade, so what's the minimum, midpoint, and max for the grade that job is in. We asked that for years, and we started to find that people were reporting it less and less, so we ended up dropping it. It's helpful information if it's in the survey. Usually it's in a different set of data, so that's part of the reason I think why it didn't get reported. And pull it from somewhere else. And then you want to pull the actual data for that title. So our assemblers, we have 50 of them from $9 to $12.20, and the average is $11.15. So I'll show you some examples in a minute. And then when you get to the benefits, if the survey asks for that, you can ask questions about the types of plans you offer, what contributions does the employer make, and then who's eligible. So is that part-timer eligible? The managers are the only ones that are eligible? What is that? Who gets it? And then when you get it all compiled, then obviously you're reporting it. So even before you want to participate, you want to find out, well, how do I do it? Do I submit a spreadsheet? Do I go in and enter it online? Do I submit it via paper? I mean, those are the typical ways. It's very expensive, and only the most sophisticated ones have one where you can just import your data set. Typically, you're going to be entering it yourself. So here's an example. So I've summarized my data, right? I cleaned up my payroll database. I put my AP and my AR accounting clerks as one, called them accounting clerk to report them together. My 22 admin assistants, so I have 4 here, but you see a lot of admin assistants, a lot of fun titles. They're admin assistants, and we'll report them as that. So here's our title in the survey, or our title. And then here is our minimum, midpoint, and max for our grades, if you're going to be reporting that. Here's our highest paid person. Our accounting clerk here is $16.75. Our lowest paid is $12.25. Our average rate is $14.25. There's 3 of them. And then a lot of organizations ask, a lot of surveys ask if it's unionized or not, and if it's exempt from the Fair Labor Standards Act, exempt for overtime or not. Here we have no exempts except for the sales manager. So those are all. This is also really helpful data when you get it from the survey. And that helps you with job matching. If 82% of them reported it as a non-exempt job, and you're looking at somebody with a master's degree, that may not be a job match. So these are the kinds of things that you would compute and report. The range, if it's asking, the grade range, the starting rate, the minimum or the lowest paid. Sometimes the starting paid is separate. So that is, let's say you might have, lowest paid at $12.50, but we start people with 11. So if it's asking that, that's sort of a proxy to get to the salary range. Most organizations aren't at the max. So knowing the minimum is helpful. And then the average, how many, what's the average rate, how many employees, and that helps too when you're going to go look at the salary data to make sure that there's enough of a data set there to use for comparison. All right, so does that make sense? Okay, and then we go to, so how to do shortcuts. So cleaning up your job title records is certainly a big step. As I said, if you get 22 admin assistants named all sorts of fabulous titles, but they're all admin assistants level, cleaning up a payroll, or even being able to have a survey title column, a data field, custom field, that would make your life easier year after year, that you say this is basically the benchmark title, or even in this survey. That way you can pull the data and summarize it very quickly. If you're needing to report salary ranges, you want to see if you can merge those in one report so it looks just like this, right, where your ranges are here and then your internal data is here. And I always use an Excel pivot table. So if you clean it up, if you're using Excel and you're cleaning it up, you export it, and then you have a column where you match your title to survey title, the pivot table actually calculates that data I just showed you on the prior page. You can always go to Excel training and look at pivot tables. It's a great tool if you don't know how to use it. It's going to save you a ton of time. And you can learn how to do it in 5-10 minutes. Okay, so when you have your data sets, you filled out the survey, and now you're looking at doing your market analysis. Then what do? Well, then you want to grab the report and then say, okay, the survey may report the mean, the median, maybe the average. Then there's potential skew, especially if the wrong job or really high-paid organizations in there. The mean gets dragged up. The median is a middle organization, so really low and really high get thrown out, so to speak, in that median. A lot of surveys also give you the 25th percentile and the 75th percentile. So that's basically the lower paid employer, the higher paid employer, without the outliers. And then the salary ranges, typically the minimum, midpoint, and max are listed there. All right, and then so you have the data. You decide which piece of data you want to pull from the survey for each of your job titles, and then you're going to compute the summary statistics. So you have to use the same units, right? If yours is an annual, then you need to compute the salary data from the survey in annual, and vice versa. And you have to think about how you're going to combine multiple data sources. If you're using 3 surveys, are you going to average them? Are you going to just use the local but then also analyze the trends across the industry? Are you going to combine industry and local? What are you going to use? Another factor may be aging the data. Now, compensation people tend to get very precise about this, that to the month, when was the survey data reported? Most organizations do pay increases on a regular cycle, usually in the first quarter of the year. So if the survey is more than a year or so old, you can always age it, which means you you prorate them up, the data up by the average, usually industry average pay increase, so say 2% for 2014. So that would provide a proxy to say, the data is a year old, we want to compare apples and apples, 2 data sources from 2015. And then when you're done with that, so you have your statistic, whatever you're going to compare, then you're going to say, what is our internal pay as a percent of market by individual and then across the job. So let me show you what that looks like in a second. All right, so here's more thoughts about using multiple surveys. So I recommend that you use local data for comparison or for ranges. And obviously it's not geographically adjusted. It depends on how much you can get. Sometimes you may have local data for all your admin jobs and then industry-specific data for your industry-specific jobs. And so you can kind of try to match those up. Usually industry surveys don't have as great data for HR, IT, operations, accounting. Those core admin jobs tend to be less well represented in those industry job surveys. You definitely don't want to use a survey if there's less than 5 organizations reporting that. The Department of Labor says they can't even put it in the survey, but I've seen sometimes where it's 2 or 3 organizations. So I would call that an outlier, and you definitely want to say we don't have data for that particular job. So as I mentioned, I like to use national industry data for the hierarchy or the differences between industry jobs. So base, senior level, supervisor, manager. And as I mentioned about aging, you can use a national pay increase statistic. So if it was 2% last year, you increase the survey data by that amount to keep them in a similar calendar. So here's an example of an accounting clerk. Your company has 2 of them at $13.50 an hour, and Bureau of Labor Statistics has a $15 average. They don't tell you how many organizations, but they do tell you how many employees. That's a lot. There's a lot of accounting clerks out there. Everybody needs 1 or 2 or 3. Economic Research Institute had 2 organizations. I'm supposed to say more, but for $15, so around the same. And that's a national survey that somewhat interpolates for local. Our survey said, HR Foundation said 1572. We had 26 organizations with 63 employees. And then maybe your industry, so this is where you could sync up local and industry. $16.25, 25 organizations. And maybe industry, we were able to just do Northeast, and for the rest we were able to do Buffalo. And then maybe one of the surveys said, here's your average salary range. So on average, they were around $15 an hour. The salary ranges start at 13, and we're at 13. So we either have 2 people that are rather new in the role, or maybe we're paying low for that. Maybe their skill sets are a little lower. There's a lot of reasons this may still be okay, even though mathematically $13.50 is quite a bit below the $15-ish an hour market data points that we're finding here. All right, here would be across multiple job titles. Here we have a $12 to $18 an hour range. For our accounting clerk, the average rate comes around at $15, and the market average is $14.25. The market average is $15, so our pay to market's 95%. Our controller, we have a higher range. Usually we only have 1 of those. That's at 92% of market. And an assistant, 87% of market. Customer service rep, a little higher than market. Office clerical, I rated these because they were below 75%. Sales manager below. All right, so lots of reasons. Maybe our office clerical is, an intern, some young person we just hired. We're okay with being below the market average. Maybe the sales manager here has a much higher variable pay component. We're okay with his or her base pay be below And there may be reasons. So when I look at these other jobs, they're within sort of 90 to 105%. So, I mean, that, overall, I don't see a general trend. I just did analysis for a client that they were on market, on market, on market. And then we get to the IT jobs, and every one of those was below market. So there's a trend across a functional area, which IT would not surprise any of you that they would be below the market. The market has just apparently gone crazy for the titles that they need, and they haven't kept up. So you're looking at trends in the data. What's it tell you? So a market average should compare not to your newest person, not to your most experienced, but a good performer with 5 to 7 years of experience would be at the market median, which is also where you want to set your grade midpoints. So you want to look for trends above or below. Across all jobs, like I said about my IT example, or specific functional area, maybe all of your jobs. I mean, I've done some where this is all 80%. I've done some, I had a client once that was all 120%. They just like to pay high. They didn't have a lot of employees. And so what are the trends telling you? Compa ratio is where you look at somebody's pay compared to the midpoint. So the market may be a little, their pay may not match as well, but are they below the midpoint because they're new? Is it a job with few incumbents? If you have less than 5, it's going to jump around because based on that person, their skill set and their experience. But if your midpoint is close to the market average across all your jobs, then that's how you know that you're market competitive. So above the market, possible explanation would, of course, be a highly tenured employee. They may be a key job for your industry or highly skilled or a manager that you had to recruit and they just came a little higher in the range. And it may be a market competitive job. So nurses in Florida, IT people everywhere. It may be something that we just have to pay to get what's it, dental hygienist. One of my clients is, the dental hygienist has become very competitive. It's an associate level job, but it's paying, at the level of their bachelor level type ranges. And below the market, you may have similar explanations in reverse. A low tenure employee, a job title that's just not as valued by the organization. Maybe we don't mind a little turnover and we see that job as a chance to save a little money. Maybe we just haven't valued it, its worth and compared it, and just we didn't think it was as highly skilled or highly paid as, we just made a gap there. Maybe your organization just might pay below the market. So if you see a trend across all the jobs, most of the jobs, then you're going to see where you are relative to the market positioning. Okay, so let me pause for a second here and see if there's any questions. Let's see, I'm going to here. Oh, not there. Here. Any questions about filling out the data and then benchmarking the data when you're ready? Put something in the chat box. No, seems straightforward. Okay. All right. Then let me go back here. And I'll resume sharing. Okay. Okay. All right. So that's base pay. That's how to benchmark it. You go through the same when you're pulling the data. If you have a summary statistic from the survey on the target or the average short-term incentive variable pay payout, pull that data as well and then compare that to what your payouts have been in last year's bonus, profit sharing, short-term incentive, whatever you call it, to see how you match up to industry or local standards for that. We have had less and less reporting in that as well, the short-term incentive plan. So we don't have a great data set anymore locally of what the targets are for managers versus staff versus entry level. I'd love that we did, but it is in our survey. It's just people tend to skip it by the time they get to it. All right, so that's base pay and then short-term incentive variable pay. For benefit plans, if there's a comparison, and I'll show you a sample in a moment of what your industry as well as locally what's offered, there's going to be, you definitely want to get as much information you have on what I'll call the big three. High value, high cost benefits, so health care, time off, and retirement. You want to make sure that you can gather information on your employer contribution. So, most surveys report that health insurance employers contribute 70 to 80%. It depends a little on whether it's a high deductible. It depends a little on family versus single, and you can get some specific data from our survey and others on that. Dental, interestingly, we've seen dental has gone to 0%. So it's offered as a plan, but it's at employee cost. And then what are the time off ranges, usually based on 1 year, 5 year, 10 years of service, that kind of thing. That's how typically time off is done. So what's the low and high employers paying in terms of time off? And then what are your benefit features? So that's where you figure out if you've got a rich versus sort of a basic plan. What's the copay on the medical insurance? What's the payout on life insurance? What retirement as a percentage of pay, your total contribution? I know some of you do a 25 or 50% match. But what's the total? Are they, if they max out, do they get 3%, 5%? Do they get 8% profit sharing? What is it? So that's the key targets you want to benchmark. So here's a sample. Here's the benefit offered in the first column. Your organization here, you know, what you offer, and then here's maybe a year or two old, but Buffalo average contribution or the plan, and then what percentage of organizations in Buffalo offer it. It's also interesting to know, do we offer, you know, so as I mentioned about dental, 60% are offering it. 0% contribution is the median. There's certainly some that contribute and some that don't. You know, and what's the plan cover? So dental, you might pay $1,000. You might have a plan that has $1,000 max. Maybe the Buffalo average is $1,250. So you know, you offer it and others don't. So in that way, you might be competitive. Health insurance. Does your organization contribute 65% to a family HMO when the Buffalo average is 75%? Yes, everybody offers it. What's your retirement? 3% overall match. And that's the average. That's the national average. Okay, 96% offer it. Short-term disability is another one that has low offerings, but a lot of organizations have AFLAC and some other group policies that employees can get into and be eligible for at their own cost. And then what was covered? Is it 75% of pay, 60% of pay, 26 weeks, 5 years? What is it? So what's the plan payout? And that's how you would compare apples and apples of your disability plans, short-term and long-term, to what the other organizations are offering. Life insurance usually has number of times salary. Sometimes it's a flat dollar. Again, you're a little light on here. If this is you, you're a little light on life insurance. Your short-term disability plan is a little light. Your contribution to health insurance is a little light. Your time off is a little light. Right, 23 days versus 30. Actually, that's quite a bit lighter. So, I mean, overall, when I look at the trend here, your organization is not at market with benefit plans. You know, so you have to decide what you want to do about that. You know, what would it cost you to bring it to market consistency? It's really hard to attract people when they have to cough up more money for their health insurance. And I've heard that anecdotally reported as well as surveys report that. So people look at health insurance, retirement, and time off when they're looking at your job offers. And sometimes it's the steps. So sometimes you might be a little light on time off the first 2 years, and then at 5 years you're a competitive market. You know, so again, that becomes hard to attract. So you want to look at the picture. You want to look at your industry and then local data. What, you know, where do you fall, and then what kind of decisions do you want to make regarding that? Okay, so you all have my contact information. Let me then end our show here. Come on, end show. Here we go. All right, and I have about 12 minutes that I can show you our survey portal, which is here. Okay, let me see if there's any. If you guys have any questions, I'll go here and see if there's any questions in the chat box about the survey completion itself, how to find a survey, how to compile your data, how to compute it, how to fill it out. All right. Well, then what I'll do then is I will go to our survey, and I will show you. So typically, I mean, a lot of survey portals, and I actually have done it's called Wage Access, the one that the Buffalo SHRM has done uses. I went in, and it's a very similar portal. It has actually very detailed benefit questions. If you're interested in learning a lot more about the exact kind of health care plan and that kind of thing. But and I've done some others on behalf of clients for some industry groups. So pretty similar way to compute and to enter your data online. So if you go to our main website, you go to Compensation Benefits Surveys, and then you'll go to our, second here we go, come into our landing page. I've also sent everybody that's been in the survey before the survey login, so that's our the sub page that goes right there. But this is on our page here if you have interest or you want to let a friend know. It talks about the survey. Here's our sample report from a few years ago. It's not all the data, but it shows you what it looks like. And here's the blank for job title. There's a survey blank, and then also has last year's survey participants or last survey. Okay, so you can always see that. What we do for human services and not-for-profits is we have them participate in the same portal, but we do not mix their data in at all. We actually have a separate complete report. So our private survey employees, there's no not-for-profits at all skewing the data in there. They tend to have much lower base pay and much richer benefit packages. Unlike the other survey that I just mentioned a minute ago, it's all there together. So it's pretty hard to benchmark when you're using a completely different compensation strategy. So and we have a group, actually I think we have about 25 or 30 of the Health and Human Services now doing that. All right, so if you're new to it, you just click here to sign up, and you can request access. Just tell your name and company, and we'll get right back to you with a login. But if you've done the survey before, there's a survey login. Let's check here. I'm going to use mine. That's my username and password to log in as a participant. Okay, looks like it's working. All right, good. Okay, typically it's listed, you'll be listed as the last email, the person that was completed the survey before. So if you think you've got a survey data set in here, you can always just email us and get the access password again. So I've had a lot of organizations, obviously HR people have changed, so Joe's no longer there, Sue emails me, and then we can send you the login, and then you can go in and change if there's a new person. You put your title, your email obviously so we communicate with you, your phone, and then as I mentioned about the demographics, it's really important that we know your number of employees, both in Western New York and then nationally. So because what we do for the survey is that 0 to 2, well actually it's 100 to 249, we do a different data statistic versus 250 and up. So this is somewhat a small to mid employer, and this is a large. If the organizations have less than about 75 employees and they're not in one of our core industries like manufacturing with some good, or distribution with some good data for us for the staff, we tend to exclude them from the survey because, again, we're talking about a different compensation strategy and philosophy. So that's really important. And then if you're unionized, because we also report the data union or not, whether your budget, the same thing for our statistics. It's just very broad here, so you're not disclosing anything particularly proprietary. Just so that we can, when we report who reported in the survey data, we can have accurate demographics, and then what kind of information. Okay, so that's just the general basic information. You can see the steps are up top here, basic. Then pick your jobs, and you'll enter your compensation data. Then you'll enter the basic benefit information and what benefits you offer, which then brings a benefit data page up. And then the completion page, you can print out both and save export your data for job, the compensation, and then you can also print a PDF of your benefits data that you filled out so you know it's there and that you have it for future reference. And both the jobs and the benefits page is customized based on what you filled out. So if you only pick 20 jobs, that's all you'll have on the compensation page. Same thing with benefits. If you say you don't offer a benefit, it's not on the benefit pages. So it saves you from having to go through things you don't offer. All right, so you want to save. It should save when you go to next step anyway, but it's always good to click save. All right, so let me go here. To do the next step. So now I've put my company information, my employer information, and this is the job listings. So there's instructions at the top here, report only compensation data for those in Western New York. The top here, you can see every year that we've participated in the survey, and you can click on this, and it'll pop up a CSV file. So there's two ways you can use this. For example, I'll show you in a second. You can, let's say we have accounting jobs. Everybody has them, right? And then here's the blurb I mentioned. Here's a little description of what it is. General accountant, right? Journal entries, typically hold the bachelor degree. This one's a standard benchmark job. Accounting supervisor, accounting manager. Okay, so you check off your jobs, and you go down here. Okay, we don't have anything in healthcare or engineering or banking. We can skip those. Oh, but we have purchasing people and operations. So that's like physical plants, like janitors there, operations facilities manager. We bunched them all together. Okay, so you pick your jobs. And so what I've done once I've saved my jobs is I can click here, and it'll pull up a CSV file. All right, here we go. And all right, so here's my data. All right, here's the job title in the survey, number of employees, and then what I put. Okay, I put they started at 20, the lowest is at 18, the highest 24, the average is 22, not union, yes, exempt, and then it has the year. So you can actually pull all your past years out here if you want to compare. But it's really helpful if you want to go then, now you can go enter this and get this computed. I can't offer you an automatic upload, but it is certainly make it a lot easier that it's in order and all the data is here for you to then enter when you're ready for the next page. All right, so I'll collapse this. Okay. And as I said, you've got your prior years here. You can, so then everybody always asks, well, why did I report those jobs last time? All right, next step. Okay, so that's where you've picked, let's say you picked 20 jobs, however many I've picked here. It takes a second to compute. You want to make sure you don't leave this page open for an hour or something, and it can time out. I think our programmers had it, so it does stay for a while, but you don't want to be compiling your statistics and then trying to enter it in here because it can, obviously it's a computer and it doesn't want to refresh. So I showed you the $18 to $24 with the average of 22 with 2 employees. Here that is. 2 things you can do here. You can put your name here. So I called it accounting professional. Here I'm going to call it AP. Oops, whatever. So this is actually where you can put your titles, and then you can put any comments. If you're not sure whether you should report it here or you want comments for yourself, feel free to put them here. We actually read all those to make sure that somebody didn't tell us something about the data that we need to clean or change in some way. So feel free to put comments. As I said, we read those. This has a lot of questions, a lot of information about starting rate, lowest, highest, average that we just went through in the training. If you want to, so here's the other thing. Sometimes you pick a job and you say, you know what, we really don't have a controller anymore. You can actually delete the job and not report it as a blank. Take a second here. That's really helpful for us because we have to go through and delete all the zeros because somebody grabbed a title but then they didn't end up reporting it. So if we go down here, controller should be gone now. Okay, great. All right, so that can be helpful. And again, remember, you're only reporting compensation data in Western New York. It's the Western New York survey. So when you're done with this, save and go to the next step. That's so you enter your compensation data from either your Excel or from your blank. Instead of the multiple page blank of job titles, I would probably go find these here, create your short stack, and then export it. Okay, so that's the compensation. And then there's benefits. So this is just an entry page. So we have the overview and then the specific questions. And we have PDFs on both of them that you can fill out, or you can print out or look at so you see what questions are going to be. You offer a fixed benefit plan. So these are just basic approaches. Cafeteria, mixed. What's your burden? So including workers' comp, disability, FICA. What is it in addition to base pay that all of your benefits, your benefit burden? And then what's your eligibility for part-time? And if there's any other notes you want to tell us so we make sure we're matching things up properly. Then you go through and you say, do you provide which ones? Health insurance, prescription, not dental, life, short-term, not long-term, retirement, okay? So I mentioned earlier about variable pay. We do have it here. We'd love more data to be reported there if you have it. So that's just basically your overview page. And then this, if you find that the benefit isn't showing up, you may not have checked it here. So like tuition won't come up if we turn it off here. So you can always go back at the top here. You can always go back to the prior step. When you log in again, you can do this in multiple sessions. When you log in again, you can just jump to the step you want to be. Okay? So I will save and go to the next step. Okay. Wait a few seconds. All right, here we go. So then there's more instructions about, so we ask, and sometimes people forget to fill this out. What is the plan type? Tell me about the plan. There's some details that match each kind of benefit. The eligibility, do you offer it for hourly, non-exempt, which would be non-direct? Exempt managers, do you offer it for part-time? Sometimes people skip that. And then, what's the contribution? So here you can see on the side we have, remember I said no tuition? There's no tuition here. So whatever benefits you offer, there's a page for each of those, a tab. Go to next step, it should tab you through these nicely, or you can just jump around. Let's say you found out more information about your retirement plan, you want to go re-enter it. You just can jump into step 5 here and click on retirement. So, which do we offer? We have, well now with Affordable Care Act you have to offer all of these, but let's say we have independent health, we only have 2 plans, and everybody's eligible. We offer it to part-timers as well. Okay. High deductible. Do we contribute to the deductible? No, we don't. Or I'm sorry, the deductible amount. These are $1,500 is the deductible, and the deductible for that's $3,500. We don't contribute anything. Maybe we contribute $500 to both. And then what do we pay towards the premium? So this one we pay 100%, perhaps. And this one maybe we pay 90%. I don't know which. Everybody's different. And then do you also offer an HMO? So maybe we offer it, but we don't contribute much towards it. We do 75 and 65. And we don't offer any premium contribution for part-timers, but at least they have it. And then this is usually the leveler for HMOs. What's the copay? $25 when you see your physician. So if I do next step, it's going to take me right to prescription. It's included in my health care plan. Of course, then everybody gets it. Right, do. Okay, and then copay. The generic's $10. The formulary, the tier 2 is $40. And that could be, sometimes they're $1 pay, and sometimes they're, 50% of the prescription. If you have any questions about your plan and how it matches up, feel free to put the comments, and then we go back and change the data based on that. So you can see, you go through each of these steps, fill out what type of plan, who's eligible, and what your contribution is. And then you go to completion. This is like the cooking show where the cake comes baked out of the oven. So you can download an order form. We're going to be keeping up with people and sending you order forms after you participate. Here's your data. You'll see there's more data entered here, and you can download it. And then benefit data is a printable PDF. We weren't able to put that in Excel. Well, we could, but it'd be really messy for you. It'd be different tabs. So that is how you fill out the survey. At any time, you can contact us. I think there's a link down here, plus you should have it. Right here is our phone number and an email, and the survey email to reach out. And if you have any questions, we are happy to help out. And thanks for being interested in participating in our survey. All right, thanks so much. So let me go back to here. See if there's any last questions. I can take unmute off here. Does anybody have any questions they want to ask me, or any suggestions about data I could cover in more detail? No? Okay.
Hi, Diana, this is Laura. I was just wondering if we were going to receive a copy of the slides today?
Yes. I'm going to send out the slides, and this is being recorded.
Okay. And I also had another